Welcome, everybody. You've built a map.
We've been through 3 seasons of understanding mental health in the modern world.
Season 4 is building on the understanding.
This season, we're going to go domain by domain: work, home, digital, relationships, identity, and take a look at what it actually means to design the spaces that you're occupying.
Not optimize it, not discipline your way through it.
Create it,
Either you're designing your field.
or something else is.
Welcome to Roaming Mind Season 4.
I do find this first note kind of comical. Last week we talked a lot about making that change and then how relational fields respond. But this is going to be more about how all of them respond. When you make a decision to change anything, things begin to happen that are not just a part of social aspects. They can take the form of social aspects, and typically they kind of do, but not in the way that we were talking about last week. Last week, we were talking about more about societal pressures being put on you to behave in a certain manner based off of what they knew about you. But, okay, so let's say I want to go ahead and I'm going to use the diet example again because it's super easy. If I'm starting a new diet and I'm telling people, hey, I'm starting a new diet, the chances of in the next week or 2 month, whatever, instances of challenges arising from that go up considerably more. And I know that it sounds like a bad thing. It's really not.
It's not a bad thing. It's just things that you may have not previewed, you may have, because I think originally when we make a decision, we can be like, okay, this is going to be something good that comes out of it. This is something bad that comes out of it. This is something neutral. But there's always, I don't want to say unintended, because there's always other reasons that, for whatever reasons, we really did not take into account that will present
Well, I think
of that choice.
yeah, and I think the word you're looking for is just unexpected. I was thinking about it last week because I have been doing a lot of identity work in my personal life, all kinds of good stuff, and like why. Well, I started asking different questions is really what happened. I started asking the question of why do I keep getting myself into this situation, but being more specific and being like, why do people think that it's okay to just come out and try and fight with me? It happens all the time. Mostly in work environments. People just walk up and they will literally try to pick verbal fights. And you're like, what is going on? I don't get it. This doesn't make any sense. What is the purpose of that? And so I did a whole bunch of reflecting and analyzing and came to the conclusion of there's a bit of a discrepancy versus external and internal. And internal's immovable. You're not shaking my core to its foundation. And there are a few people that can, but even when they do, we still persist. That's not the thing. But the external is not being portrayed the same as the internal. And that's an okay thing. But I made the decision. I was like, I'm going to do something about this. And there's nothing wrong with that. There wasn't, I knew that things would get, I don't want to say hairy, but there would be some things that come back that may be a little bit more difficult to engage with. And this week, that's all it's been. I mentioned there are only a handful of things that will shake me to my core. And I have literally ran into each and every single one of them this week. Not in a manner that I've ever encountered them before. I would have never expected the way that they responded, or the situations that I got myself into somehow responded, because these are normal everyday situations that I've been placed in many times before. It's not like the situation itself shifted, but the way that everything came together in those situations shifted in its entirety. And I had to respond in the way that I had dictated I was going to respond, or I'm going to keep dealing with that same thing over and over and over and over again. And so it came out through those social aspects, but they were structural in their ways of being. These are, I don't want to say structural issues, but they are structural beliefs, structural identities with which I have held on to for decades. And so, again, I mean, just trying to highlight when you make any sort of decision across any of these domains, structural, relational, environmental, temporal, certainly, but temporal I feel is a little bit more self-explanatory. Right? If I give myself a different time deadline, we're not talking about like, oh my God, monumental shifts. Yeah, of course there's going to be monumental shifts because you just compressed a timeline that you thought was going to take here and compressed it down to here. I don't think I don't think we really need to hammer that lesson home. But the structural and the environmental and those social things genuinely are a big shift. Those require, and maybe the time example is worth looking at anyway, because when we compress time lines, if I decide that I'm going to, I don't know, make some monumental achievement happen in a week instead of 3 or something like that. I don't know, just a useless, just an example. That compresses and affects our structural beliefs. That affects our relationships with other people. That dictates a good bit of how we begin to see the environment around us. So rather than, and I think up until this point, we've really looked at each of these domains separately. We've looked at structural, we've looked at relational, we've looked at environmental. The time, again, time just, it constantly blends throughout. So putting that in, but you have to, in order for the model to work, you must understand that time affects. You see what I mean? Like that. I just think time is the most efficiently understood. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so, I mean, that's really the goal of today, is to kind of see that when we make these things happen in terms of mental health and wellness, everything is affected. It's not just that timelines get compressed. Right? It may be, okay, I need to move out of the house where I'm living. We're talking 3 months from now because I have to go and do this, and this. But the situation is so unbearable, so let's cut that 3 months down to a month. It changes beliefs, guaranteed, because I have to sit there and be like, well, I can do it. That's the most obvious belief, other than the rest that have to follow in order to get out in a month. The environmental is pretty obvious. Our environment is shifting from one thing to the next. The physical environment itself is shifting. And those relational aspects are going to be tried and tested, because I'm going to go out and interact with people that I wasn't going to interact with for a couple of months. So those relational patterns are shifting, all because we compressed a timeline from 3 months to 1 month. But we tend not to think of them as this dynamic interplay. We just tend to think of them as, oh, okay, I'm moving out. We don't think that that's a major environmental shift. We may think of, again, we may think about the timepiece because that's a normal aspect of it. We set a goal and we set a timeline to achieve it. It's just kind of how it goes. The relational aspect, yeah, we go ahead and we interact with more people, but we're not like, oh, my social dynamics are shifting. R- That's one of those things that very rarely do we address. And the structural stuff, most of us never even come to the point that, oh, this is going to change my beliefs. This is going to change the root of who I think I am, what I think I do, all of those things.
Mhm.
But every decision that we make in terms of that has these effects. And I'm all about thinking about more positive aspects of things because I think that that's really important. But the same goes for the flip side. If I make a negative decision in a specific way, it affects all of those things. And this is why mental health is such a major piece of our lives today, because once we've begun to pay attention to that and figure it out, okay, well, now we've altered the structural landscape. We have to go ahead and make sure that we are focusing on these things going forward, because if not, then we're trying to remain ignorant and pushing back, and that in turn causes infinitely more friction. That is a vicious cycle to be in, and that
Oh, yeah.
is less than ideal. If you're currently in that situation, I feel for you. Been there, done that. Don't want to go back. But there is light at the end of the tunnel, always. It doesn't matter how deeply ingrained in rooted patterns you are. It doesn't matter how terrible your social situation is. It doesn't matter how terrible your environmental situation is. The beauty of it is we have the ability to go ahead and make those shifts. We can go ahead and say, this is not the environment for me. We can go ahead and say, this is not how I choose to think today. Let me go about doing something differently. These people are not conducive to my well-being. Let me make sure that I set those boundaries so that I don't have to go ahead and worry about that. A week is far too insane to make a move of this caliber. And I don't need it to take a week. There's not external pressures that are forcing me to do it in a week. I only bring that up because I've moved in a week because we had external pressures. It's not fun. I don't wish that upon anybody.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's
I'm
a
the
real
same way.
bitch.
I've had to move within 2 days, and it's not the most
Right.
ideal because you are, it's a, well, physically you're in a panic, and then there's all the other stuff that you have to think about
Mm-hmm.
that comes with moving. It's not just all the dirt, because it's the granular, and then there's
Mm-hmm.
a, the medium stuff, and then there's a macro granular. And usually you have to let go of the macro granular, but as a type A person, I need to work out those granular level in order to really get to the to get to the big stuff as well. So it's an unfortunate situation.
And it varies depending upon which personality type you are. I'm the exact opposite. I don't work on granular levels at all. It just doesn't, nothing personal. But this is why we had that whole discussion on personalized
Oh yeah.
mental health, because it is going to be different for each and every single person. The other thing that I think is really, really useful to look at is we put each of these into its own category. And a lot of that is because we exhibit different behaviors depending on the context. We've been over this. This is pretty normal. We are a different person at work than we are at home, than we are out and about on the town. We have different personalities. We have different bits and pieces of ourselves that show at specific points in time. And it is not, it doesn't always work out for mental health if we are only treating them as one and one. We have to look at them as a whole because, all right, so great, I fixed one thing in work, but that didn't necessarily translate over to our personal lives, or it
Hmm.
didn't necessarily transfer over to our family situation. These are issues. We don't always communicate through cross domains. This is relatively consistent across the board. We see this in academic disciplines. We see this a lot in software, and it's getting better in software within the past year or two. I remember when I was thinking about augmented reality infrastructure a long time ago. One of the biggest problems that we kept bumping into is that this person's code base is inaccessible to this person and to this person and to this person and to this person. And I will tell you, one of the best things that I have done over the past month is build my own tool that I am now using constantly that connects all of my other tools so that they're all in one place. They all have the same, this tool has this context, this tool has this context, and this tool has this context, so that we can all make decisions. That alone is worth its weight in gold. But if we're just trying to treat everything like its own separate thing, we may have addressed it over here, but that might not have been the core issue that was running under here the whole entire time. That's problematic. We must consult them as a whole. If we don't, then we're stuck at that granular level, and we can't actually enact the necessary changes to be able to get to where we want to get to. It's quite a tall ask, because this is not it's not simple. There's nothing simple about connecting one piece of information to this piece of information to this piece of information. Number one, we are not rewarded for it in society, or at least in Western society. We want you to specialize. And we want you to specialize from a very, very early age. We want you to start when you're a kid, find that specialization, and then work through all the way to adulthood. And we do. That level of behavior is rewarded consistently throughout society. If you meet somebody and they're like, oh, well, I just want to do a little bit of everything, you're like, well, that guy's fucked. There's no way around that. But it's not true that they're fucked. From a societal standpoint, sure, because their journey towards getting to where they want to is going to be infinitely more difficult, because there's no infrastructure to set those people up for success. School is not going to reward that level of thinking, because that's not what it's designed to do. It is designed to stick you into a lane and push you through. This is not an attack on school. I'm not going into it. We understand there's problems.
I think at least higher education level forces you to go down. Actually, different school systems. I'm
telling you. Because I will tell you, at the high school I worked at, you picked a path when you walked in ninth grade, and you could change the path, sure, but you picked one of 5. And that's just how it was. Sure, you can take classes in other paths, but it's not. They want you to specialize from an earlier and an earlier and an earlier age. That's just how. And there's something to be said about it. There is something you talked about. I need to get into the details in order to see level.
There is a benefit, because there is a benefit that comes with expertise. Because it's that thing of, if you going with the example, if you have somebody who's an expert in one thing versus the person who knows a decent amount, the expert is always going to win out, because they have more experience and more
in that domain specifically.
In that specific domain. A good example is looking at medicine. For example, you have a cardiovascular surgeon, an ENT, and a neurosurgeon. They all can see the same patient. There's some overlap, but if you are having a cardiovascular, specifically heart issue, you're not necessarily going to go to the neurosurgeon for it. The neurosurgeon is going to have some type of expertise, but they're not really the one you want to be operating on you. You want the experienced cardiovascular surgeon to be doing that.
I like I said, I'm not. This is not advocating for a
Yes,
complete
I agree
disconnect
with you.
of that. I think we've gotten a little off topic because we're talking about knowledge base now. I was just using that as an example because even in your example, even in obviously, if I don't have the expertise to be able to operate, that's going to be a problem. That nobody's going to dispute that. But if I don't know the entire system with which it's operating in, I might be performing surgery on the wrong thing, and that in itself is problematic. It. The problem is what you just described. It's very complex. It is not easy to go ahead and do heart surgery. It's not easy to do neurosurgery. It's not easy to do any of that shit. The more complexity that gets added, the harder it is for us to grasp and understand. Think about things that. Economics. Economics is
There you go.
highly complex. There's a lot of moving pieces, and most people do not understand even the first thing about economics. Supply and demand. Sure. Okay. Yeah, we understand supply and demand. But outside of supply and demand, unless you're an economics, you really get into it,
Oh,
you're
I would
you're
say
not getting there.
my
I'm
father's
sorry.
economist. I was gonna say even economists don't understand don't understand economy. That's how understandable it is.
That's the thing. These fields that are interacting are complex. They are not acting individually. They are constantly performing this really nice song and dance. And it's not easy to come and find that complexity. It's not easy to in most modern day psychological frameworks, we don't think about these interactions as a dynamic field. We don't. We think of them. Most of them are geared more towards that more singular focus. This arises because of this. There's a clear point to point, and that's just how it's going to be. But that's not where mental health fits. Well, fits. That's not the right way of putting that. That's not where it. That's not where it exists. I can go to therapy for years and we can talk about one emotional piece. And I'll be like, well, I just don't know why it's not getting any better. Well, because you only dealt with one emotional piece. And you've been talking about the same emotional piece for a decade and a half. So obviously, it's not going to get, it's not going to come to that point that you need it to, because there's so much more complexity that is going on other than that one emotion that you've been feeling for the past 10 years. I don't think it's not even a justification thing. It's not like, oh, we're just going to do it this way because that's how it's always been done. Oh, this just makes more sense, so I'm going to do it this way. It's not even on our radar for most of the time. It's not. Again, I made a structural decision. All right. It came out in other places. Okay. If I did not have the framework or the knowledge that I currently obtain, I would have never pieced those two together and been like, oh, this is happening because of this, which is exactly what I want to happen. Going back to what we were talking about last week, it's exactly what we want to occur because that is how we change those patterns. If again, let's use something other than food or diet. If I want to stop being super angry all the time, because this was way back when, if I wanted to stop being so angry, I had to look at those structural things that were causing me to be so angry in the first place. When I found them, I had to address them in its immediacy. Oh, I cannot view the entire world as dumb just because they don't think the way that I do. That is just how I used to think. What can I say? Over the course of the next bit of time, I constantly would encounter more and more stupid people. Why? Because I'm actively trying to change those thought patterns. Okay, so let's think about why this works from a neuroscience standpoint. I have been thinking this one way for a decade. What happens when neurons get more experience over time?
They get habituated to the same pattern that you've been
They
trained them
get
to do.
what what grows over top to make them fire faster?
Myelin.
There you go. See, there's neuroscientific mechanics that explain all of these things that happen. As that neuron fires more, that myelin sheath grows bigger and stronger, and it fires more rapidly. So if I decide that I want to change that, the only way to change that is to change the response pattern. That response pattern has to happen from external things, from the environment, from social patterns, from time control. All of these things have to interplay together in order for us to go ahead and make that different decision. That also highlights just how complex it is. That is in no way, shape, or form a simple thing. And it is not something that, especially at 17 when I started this and I was walking down the street, I was like, oh, that's just my neurons firing in a different pattern. I'm like, oh, fuck you. Get away from me, you idiot. There is a level of complexity that exists beyond each and all of our understanding. And we'll get there. I don't want to get into that yet. What happens when we add more and more and more, but we're not able to remove the base? It compounds. And there's good compounding and there's bad compound. Well, good, bad, whatever. There's compounding that we like. There's compounding that we don't like. I love compound interest. I do not love compounding problems. That's going to be a thing.
I like compounding interest on my investment. Like compounding interest on my credit card bills. Take that shit away.
See what I mean? When we think about that, okay, so you have a field over here, you have a field over here, and you have a field over here, and one here. All of them have their own set of principles that they operate under, and they have their own set of guidelines, rules, restrictions, constraints, all of that come with it. Okay? When you multiply two, we're just gonna, for the sake of simplicity, we're gonna look at it as a like each field has two things. All right, so this has two. Your structural has two pieces that come with it, and the time has two pieces that come with it. All right, so you multiply those together because you have to multiply them. That gets to be 4. Then you take the relational, that has two pieces that come with it. Oh, very quickly, it just became 8. And then down here, we take this other one, environmental, that we haven't discussed. That's got another 2 pieces that come with it. Boom, that's 16. 16 different principles that you have to pay attention to across 4 separate domains, except for the fact that it's not just 2. There's a whole host of them. And each of them have their own individual complexity that sits inside of there. And you wonder why people are overwhelmed these days. Because we just keep adding to that complexity. There is something to be said about the simple life. I'm not telling you to go live it. I'm just saying there is an element of that genuinely makes sense from a mental health standpoint. Not to say that you can't be mentally healthy inside of those complex domains, but in order to do that, we have to take a different approach. We can't take the simple life approach of this one thing is the problem to a problem that is not that simple. That's actually the perfect segue. That's filed. So this sets up this idea that we have a very specific opportunity to be able to preemptively look at those field interactions.
Mm-hmm.
If we try to do it in retrospect, it's done. There's nothing that we can do because it's already happened. The only thing that we can do, and this was the I don't want to say precursor, but a precursor would be an idea of psychotherapy. We have identified this lane. We can analyze what happened in retrospect and then preemptively seek to change it in the future. Cognitive behavioral therapy then goes to the next level. We can look at the thoughts and the opinions that are causing that emotional track, and we can try to preemptively stop that from happening. The same works when it comes to field interactions. We see the field, we're like, oh, okay, this makes sense. I've got to go ahead. We start to see it as a cohesive, complex entity. And then we can begin to start designing those aspects of our lives in the way that we want. We can choose what kind of environments we want to put ourselves in. We can choose what kind of social context we would like to put ourselves in. We can think about those beliefs that are going to, those more structural elements that are going to get us to the places that we want to get them to. This does not, and I want to make this very clear, this does not eliminate any sort of hardship or suffering, because hardship and suffering are a part of getting to where we want to get to. Guaranteed. But what it does do is it puts us one step closer towards eliminating unnecessary suffering. If I'm not aware that my environment plays a role and I just keep going and I'm like, well, it's that person's problem, blah, 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 well, what's the solution? Get out of that environment. But if we don't think about it, I think we've always had some kind of understanding of that, because if you look at how addiction was treated, the first thing that they would do was they would get you out of the environment. The problem is that we would stick you in an environment that was even worse than what you came from. Not always, that's not always the case, but unless you were paying tens of thousands of dollars, it's not going to be better than what you came from. There's no free institutions where people go for treatment. No, thank you, sir. Not to say that it didn't work sometimes, and in the certain whatever, but those were not ideal places. So just understanding that the way of moving beyond all of these things is getting out ahead of it, seeing it for what it is, and making conscious decisions to do something differently. And what are those things that we do? Well, we've discussed all of those across 3 seasons. We've identified all of those areas and all of those personalization aspects that you go into, that you try to go ahead and preemptively think about. Now, I understand it's a lot. Sure. Mm-hmm.
It is wild.
This is a gradual shift. This is something that occurs over time. It's the way that until we find a way to go into somebody's brain and physically alter neurons immediately, which is a scary thought in and of itself. Because again, once you do that, it's not just a single neuron that's firing, it's clusters of neurons too. So you have to not only alter those individual ones, you got to modify clusters. And like, as far as I know, we really aren't anywhere near there. We have some level of understanding for things like motor cortex, but when it comes to emotional processing, intellectual processing, we're just beginning to start to collect that data. That's okay. Not a big deal. We can get there. I guess the thing that kind of brings up is, all right, so you're telling me that there's all these problems, these things that I got to proactively think about. Is it actually going to change anything? That's at least the question that I have. And personally, I would it I don't wanna say it's obvious because it's really not. The major issues with which you used to experience, have, do, whatever, uh, begin to just not be as big of a problem. I guess we kind of alluded to it with the unnecessary suffering. The problems that are unnecessary tend to fall by the wayside, or even if they don't, because they will still, things will still crop up. That's okay. We will be equipped to deal with them in a way that we never really thought possible. Never thought it was possible to interact with some of the things that I have to interact without losing my shit and being like, what is wrong with you? I don't have to do that anymore. It just, okay, you have your opinion, I have mine, and we're gonna treat that as such. I don't have anything else to say on it. It makes no difference. So the way that we approach living and the way that we approach our problem set is going to shift, which in turn is going to modify each and every one of those fields, which in turn is going to change the things that we get back. And then this is what's cool is we get to look at it and we get to say, okay, I like that, or I don't. And if you don't like it, that's okay. Make those minor little shifts again and see what comes back. This is the best way to go ahead and operate in those moments.
Yep.
Because that is the way to get us toward the life that we are looking forward to living. We don't have an infinite amount of time. Our time is finite. We might as well appreciate it while we're here. Appreciating it is not doing hard things, because we're going to have to do those hard things. This is an inevitability of life. But we will get to appreciate it in spite of those difficulties. Anything to add?
No, you kind of said it all. Well,
Sorry.
trying to, okay. I mean, uh, uh, good job, AJ. You did it.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Sorry, I just like at first I wasn't feeling it, and then I was like, then I slowly got into it, and then it was like
Uh-huh.
that. Then by the time I said, oh, it's not. It's almost like a near the end.
This was really hard. This was really hard. One thing I want to do before we get into that, though, is the reflection and the closing. So we can
Yes,
just and please, I want handle both.
okay.
Don't let me do it. Don't. The other thing is too is you don't have to read it word for word. As long as you get the overall
Yeah.
idea, it's totally fine.
Today we've talked a lot about that awareness and knowing how to change and knowing the connection between the environmental, the timing, and all those feel that comes along with it. Um, you and again going knowing changing the design and then making the right choices that comes along with it, and then if it's not working, you move it on, or you change it, and you can if it's working you continue it, if it's not working you change it. So there's a lot of complexity that comes with that comes with it, and it's not a small thing. It's something that you have to grapple with, and it's always going to constantly be changing, because that change is always going to come, and it's always going to be affecting how you move and how you navigate those fields. And I just want to leave y'all with knowing that the decision was never just about one thing. It's always encompassing many, many other things. As I just said earlier, you have 2 from here, 3 from here, 7 from here, and they're all compound. So it might feel like it's one thing when you're making that choice to change something. It might just be, but in reality, there is so many other things that come with it, whether we are aware of it, whether we are not. And if you just want to end the podcast today by saying that if you're ever holding a decision that keeps touching more than one plane for you, we do offer section words at theinactive.com.
That's where we'll leave it for today.
You don't need to do anything with it right now.
Each episode this season will end with a question worth carrying.
Not an answer, just a place to look.
If this is your first time here, you're welcome to follow the show. New episodes drop weekly.
And if you want to go deeper, find us at theactive.com.
We'll be back next week.
Until then, notice what you're already designing your field.
And whether that's by choice.